in 1947, 2 years after the war supposedly ended. There was a massive, yes?
You went to Antarctica?
Yes. There was a massive joint American and British military convoy that went to Antarctica. Why? What do we know about Antarctica? The Schwabenland, where the Germans actually went after World War II in 1945 with their technology and their equipment by submarine to Antarctica. And if you remember the last time I was here, I told you about Lake Vostok in Antarctica, which has now been abandoned because of some strange electromagnetic anomaly which is coming up from underneath that underground lake, which is frozen. All has to do with mind control and those involved with it. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. How many of you heard the story of a woman, and I'll have to put it in quotations, whose name was Candy Jones? How many of you know that story? Some of you do. Okay. Her real name was Jessica Wilcox. And this is a story that happened in the late 1940s and 1950s, and even into the 1960s. And she was the first programmed sex slaves by the government. And she was used in New York and California and Asia and even Europe. Candy Jones was the name of her alter, her other personality. Her real name was, as I'll put it here, Jessica Wilcox.
She's a model.
Yes, she was a model, and she eventually owned her own agency in Manhattan. And very often she would get a manila envelope in the mail, and she'd open the envelope and she'd go into Candy Jones. And she actually was a pinup girl in the 1940s during the war. A lot of military people had her up in their walls. And she was the first known woman in the United States to be used in this manner, which eventually became known as the monarch programming, which we're going to get into. She tried to kill herself many times unsuccessfully. Went through a lot of therapy. Knew a lot of well-known, high-level people who basically used and abused her. She became the prototype of the monarch sex slave. Which, by the way, even though there's mostly women in this program, there are also men. Although it's not as common. Her programming in those days used a lot of hypnosis. And there were shots taken of such people where they would actually have the person go into the altar and then take a cigarette and burn their skin while they're talking to them. They felt nothing. Or they would take a pin or a clip or a needle and jag right through the skin in their arm or their face. No reaction. Take it out, no wound. Go to the altar, to the original personality. The original personality had no memory of the event. Therefore, the body responds to what the mind remembers and does. No wound. This is also how you can be taken and programmed brutally and have no mark on your body. Because if you return to a different alter personality, which does not remember or have the experience, the body will not show that experience. Remember what we learned in language of hyperspace and in healing techniques. The body does what the mind tells it. The body does not lie. The body has no memory of an event. There is no evidence of an event.
A cellular memory.
Cellular memory of who is in control, who is operating the genetics at the moment. That's what will be shown. There have been personality compartments or alters within the same person who have been in surgery, or who have an allergy, or who are mentally ill. And then when they're in an altar, those manifestations do not show, because it's another personality.
That's actually multiple personality.
We're going to talk about that. There's many forms of MPD, or multiple personality disorder. Some is programming, some is natural, some is something else.
How about when people get like skin grafts and eye transplants on pigs, and then they start taking on, well, from other
The
people,
characteristics.
similar characteristics?
Yes.
Don't
There you're talking about
they?
energetics.
Cellular memory, isn't it?
Yes, but it's foreign cellular. It's not from that person's body. There's the difference. We're talking about an alter within the same body, same cells. When you put new cells from a different body into that, that's a different story. Okay, that's a matter of energetics.
Jack Schwartz, German Jewish man who was in concentration camps, he did a lot of New Age stuff. Because I saw him do all of that. With a needle in the arm,
Yeah.
no bleeding left.
Yeah.
And the Germans let him go because they were terrified. Of course, that's all stories.
I'm going to get into some of the histories right now. First of all, what is brainwashing? Is it a form of programming? It is a form of programming. It involves hunger or food deprivation, fatigue or sleep deprivation, tenseness or stress, threats, violence, drugs, and hypnotism. All of these are components of brainwashing, which is a form of programming. It is mostly done by military of an enemy nation who is trying to get information from a captive person. But it can be done in other circumstances. Most of this work involving mind control and programming in its modern form was developed by the Nazis, particularly Joseph Mengele, who was known as the Angel of Death. And despite what you may have learned, Mengele was brought to this country under Project Paperclip to continue his work. Only Mengele here was known as Dr. Green. Sometimes he was also called Dr. Greenberg. He went to, or worked for, the OSS, which was the Office of Strategic Services back in the late 40s. The OSS became the CIA. And he continued his projects both here and in Canada and also in South America, particularly in Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. They became a gigantic laboratory for him where he practiced mind control and genetic manipulation. What he was trying to do in South America was to see if they could take a race of people and convert them into programmable genetics. So he was very interested in turning brown eyes into blue eyes, and brown or black hair into red or blonde hair. And he worked a lot on the Indians in the Amazon, and then the indigenous population in Paraguay and Argentina. In fact, a movie was made about it, I believe, in the late 70s.